One piece of my studio that's been around for a long time is this hanging lamp. It's a regular old desk lamp that I've modified to hang upside down instead of right side up. You can find these for really cheap at thrift stores, but I usually don't like them because they take up desk space. These two lamps I'm going to do the same modification to, hang them from the top so they don't get in the way. Usually the springs on these things counteract gravity by pulling the lamp up, but if you mount it upside down, obviously that's not going to work. Basically, you have to reverse the action of the springs. Now, depending on the geometry, this can be either very simple or a little tougher. Typically, the joint at the base is a little weirder than the one at the elbow. Now, before I dive too deep on this, I gotta check if these lamps are actually working. These were both Goodwill finds for maybe $2 or $3. Electronics all work. Starting with the pink one, I noticed it was missing some hardware. I think I bought a broken one on purpose because it was extra discounted, but a little nut and bolt thrown in there makes that problem go away. Some of the stock hardware was a bit loose too, so I tightened that up. This one is also missing some springs, which isn't a big deal because we're messing with all that anyway. The silver one was also missing a bolt at the base, no biggie, just another quick replacement. When I started the project, I thought this one was also missing springs, but it turns out this is just a friction fit model, so you'll be able to see how to do it with either kind. The friction fit is obviously a lot easier. First I gotta mount a plank for it to hang from, find a drill bit that's the same size as the stem at the base, and make your spot for it to hang from. Now to keep it from falling out, I drill a tiny little hole in the stem of the lamp so that you can put a cotter pin through it and then bend the tails out so it doesn't fall out. This won't support a ton of weight, but it's been plenty for these little lamps in my experience. Now I was seeing more wiggle room here than I wanted, and that's partially from too big of a drill bit and partially from too thin of a board. I swapped out the plywood offcut for a thicker piece and drilled a new hole at 7/16 instead of ½ an inch. With the friction fit one mounted up, it actually worked totally fine upside down. There is one modification you have to make to this though. There's a little plastic stopper that keeps you from spinning it all the way around. Usually this means you just can't point the lamp straight up, but in this case it means you can't point the lamp downwards. Easy enough modification though. Now it's time to move on to the more complicated kind. The springs just need to pull the lower of the two arms upwards. So with the lamp upside down, the springs need to get flipped. For the first set of springs, I'm going to reuse some of the hardware, just moving it over to the other arm. The wires will probably be running through that arm, so you have to cut them and pull them out. I accidentally forgot that and drilled through the cable, but not a big deal because it has to get cut to pull it out anyway. Just don't make that mistake while it's plugged in. Now flipping the spring over to the other arm isn't going to be quite enough. It is pulling the correct direction now, but you see how it's pulling up on the arm all the way over until about this point. Anything higher than that and the spring is going to be pulling the arm down. Not what we want. The correct position should have the spring doing nothing when the arm is hanging neutral, so in line with the arm when it's vertical. With this positioning, the springs will assist in pulling the arm up whichever direction I go. It does work, but at the very top of the range, the spring is a little weak. All that means is it needs more tension. I can just move the mount on the arm out a little bit. It works pretty well, as long as you got it generally right. The exact position isn't too finicky. Now it's time to do the same to the lower arm. Now I am short a few springs here. I'm gonna need 2 more to get this thing working. For one-off very specific springs, I like to go to the antique store instead of the hardware store. If you've got some like this in your town, full of random odds and ends, it's often a lot easier to get one-offs of random things you need. I got distracted looking at $3 big ol' hinges. Got a couple of those. Found a bucket of big springs and a bucket of small springs. Grabbed a few of these. Stores like this are starting to disappear in the age of disposable goods and online shopping. This one included. They're closing up shop at the end of the year. If you're in Indianapolis, come to Tim & Company's, and if you're anywhere else, go check out what's in your local area. Support small used hardware stores like this one. You never know when it'll come in handy. Got myself an old hand planer, a couple hinges, and some springs. Now I could stick some hardware to the lower arm of the lamp. To make the longer springs that I need, I stuck two of these shorter ones together. On the elbow, I took off the opposite screw, replaced it with a longer one, and stretched my spring up to that. And that worked just about as well as I could have hoped. It seems like with this process, the angle is the most important thing and the exact tension is pretty forgiving. Overall, not as complicated of a process as you might think. I still had some finishing touches. I gotta remove the tab that's preventing this one from spinning around too. In this case, it looked a lot wimpier, so I just forced it and snapped it off. Then it's just making sure the wiring works. I like to zip tie it along that arm, adding some slack at each moving part. Now, when it comes to splicing the wires back together, I would recommend actually soldering them. I used solder seal wire connectors to get it working, but I can't speak on the safety of this since it is getting plugged directly into the wall. My other lamp has been fine like that for about 3 years. But do your own research, be safe, don't trust me for any wiring tips. With the cable zip tied back to the arms, everything was ready to go. I'm not sure what the final position of all three of these lamps is going to be, but with the way I mounted them, it's easy enough to move them around later. The chrome one will probably end up on the sewing bench that I built the other day, but I'm going to leave these two on the workbench for now, one on each end. As a cheap and easy project, repurposing easily found old stuff, I think this is a nice one. You can never have too many lighting options in your workspace. That's all for today. I'll see you tomorrow, and thank you for your time.